So we're back with some more info on RE Requiem, where the developers tease the first-person perspective for Leon's gameplay, the future of Resident Evil games, and how we might not be done with our classic RE heroes, and more. So let's talk about it. Alright, so this interview is coming to us from the website Game Mecha, who sat down with Requiem's producer, Masato Kumazawa. Now, just a heads up, this is a Korean website, and it's being translated through the Google Translate into English, so some of the translations might seem a little bit funky, but for the most part, I think all of the information does come through as we need it. So starting off first, they ask Kumazawa about the title Requiem. What does it relate to in terms of Grace, but also Leon? Kumazawa goes on to say, Requiem has many meanings. For Grace, it deals with her mother's past and how to reconcile with it. It could also be a requiem for Raccoon City, or the people who lived there. For Leon, it's a requiem, and I'd appreciate it if you'd watch it. Requiem holds a different meaning for each character. Now, the term Requiem has a few different meanings, but I think in regards to this story, it is essentially a remembrance of someone or something, which again makes sense for Grace. Her mother has been killed, and she's now returning to the scene of the crime, so that's going to drudge up a lot of memories for her. So how does she reconcile the death of her mother as more info is now coming to light? Seemingly, one of the villains of the game, Gideon, had played a massive role in the death of her mother. And it may not just be Gideon. We've seen a number of people in these trailers. There's the hooded man who doesn't really quite look like Gideon. He clearly looks sick. Maybe he's also infected with this Elpis virus, but it could be a group of people working together to track down Grace and enact whatever their plans are. But Requiem can also mean a tribute, or a eulogy, or a yagoogly for those who have seen Zoolander, which could be more fitting for the character of Leon. Now, we've talked in past videos of what if Leon dies? That fear of losing a character like Leon. But that might not be the case. The developers have said in other interviews that Leon has a secret that he's not quite ready to reveal yet. What's that secret? I think it's the fact that he is infected with Elpis. How this came to be, we don't know. I'm sure we'll find out in the game, but obviously in the trailers you can see Leon's neck isn't looking quite healthy on the right side. He's clearly got some sort of infection going on, so that could be the secret that he's dealing with. And instead of it being a story where he dies, him now going back to Raccoon City, he is remembering everything he went through on that fateful night. But he's also wrestling with his own mortality now of, I'm sick with this Elpis virus, I don't know what's gonna happen, I'm gonna try and make the most of my life and what I have left. Now granted, it's Resident Evil, they don't always get super deep and philosophical, but sometimes they do add some layers to these characters, and I think that's a way that Requiem could fit a theme for Leon. It's not just, oh, what if he dies? It's no, he's really struggling with what his life was, how Raccoon City shaped him, and what could lie after, assuming he can make it past whatever this infection is. And that's what makes a character like Leon so great, is that he is the quippy action hero, but he's got some layers to him. He's been through so much, and he's not just, that stereotypical hero character. He straddles a very fine line of cool guy and being a bit of a nerd, and it works so well for the character, and I think that's why he's endeared himself so much, these past 30 years of Resident Evil, and why people love him so much, and why people feel kind of defensive towards him. Like, you can't kill Leon, that's our boy. So I'm really excited to see how that theme of Requiem plays out through the story as we learn more about Grace and her mom, but also what Leon is dealing with, and also the interactions between Leon and Grace, as they will meet up multiple times throughout the story, as the developers have confirmed. So that's pretty exciting, and to see them maybe motivate each other, kind of grow, maybe Leon becomes a bit inspired by Grace and vice versa, I think is really cool. Now, interestingly enough, the devs did also say that they will be focusing on Leon's, as they refer to it, super secret past. And for this info, we're actually going to jump over to the website RuliWeb, which has a much better translation of some of these questions. And I'll also be pulling from them for the next question that we discuss in this video. But in case you're wondering, I did go through and read both articles, and even though the translations are a little bit different, they are still relatively similar in regards to what the actual meat of what Kumazawa was saying is in this article. Kumazawa would say, Grace, the daughter of Alyssa from Outbreak, is the main character, but this time, we want to focus more on Grace herself. We'll also be focusing on Leon's secret past, which occurred during a time when he wasn't present. I think it's important to focus on these two main characters over other characters. However, I hope you'll also be interested in the other characters. So this is really cool, getting to learn more about Leon's past. That's something that they've dived into a little bit in previous games with, I think it was the Dark Side Chronicles, exploring Operation Javier between Leon and Krauser. We get a little bit more of that and how they trained together in RE4 Remake. So learning more about what shaped Leon in those years between RE2 and Requiem, or more importantly, RE6, I guess technically, or screw it, RE2 to RE Requiem, I guess would make the most sense. So diving more into that, maybe learning why Leon wasn't part of certain other operations. You had Resident Evil Village, which was this really big thing. Leon ain't there. Granted, Jill, Claire, other people weren't there either, but it makes you wonder about his absence throughout the history of Resident Evil. And perhaps, if Leon is struggling with Elpis, maybe they dive into how exactly he becomes infected. This is pretty cool. Up next, there have been some concerns from people of, okay, they're gonna split the story into two playable sections. It's one unique story, so it's not like Resident Evil 6 where you have different campaigns you can play through. Leon and Grace are in the same story, they'll just have their own sections to play. And Leon is gonna be the more action-packed stuff we would come to see from Resident Evil 4. And by contrast, some people are a bit worried of, okay, we know Leon's stuff is probably gonna be super cool and fun, but what if we go back to Grace and it's just not as fun to play by comparison? What if it's a little bit slower? Is that something they were concerned about? Turns out, Kumazawa was. Kumazawa would go on to say, yes, we had a lot of concerns and difficulties. We had many concerns from the planning stage. The fundamental gameplay structure could feel like two games combined, a package where you can enjoy different gameplay styles in one game. So we had a lot of concerns. We worried that combining them would make the game even more awkward, and that it might not be a good gaming experience. That's why we put a lot of effort into structuring the overall story to tie the two gameplay styles together. In Leon's case, he utilizes multiple weapons in this game, but wouldn't it be unsatisfactory if he transitioned to Grace before experiencing all of Leon's growth potential? We developed each and every one of those aspects through trial and error. It was a challenge, but I think the story ended up being much more seamless than we had intended. We were surprised. We could say we successfully completed it through repeated trial and error. Based on everything else he says, it sounds like they found a way to make both of these different types of gameplay styles work in a way where you're gonna enjoy both of them, which, you know, makes sense. Again, the DNA of Grace's sections is Resident Evil 2, my personal favorite Resident Evil in the series, the OG, and the remake I think is phenomenal, one of my favorite remakes of all time. And RE2 has a really great blend of being, you know, first and foremost, survival horror. You're limited on ammunition, you don't get new weapons super fast, you do come across some stuff every once in a while. You've got some genuinely terrifying and tough enemies that you don't always fight, you have to run from them. And on top of managing your supplies and navigating these really tight, scary corridors, you are doing some really cool puzzles. So I think if they can really nail home the survival horror aspect of Grace's campaign, that will keep it fun and fresh to play. And hopefully not a situation where it's like, all right, we're Leon, this is fun. Oh no, we're back as Grace. This isn't nearly as fun. Now I gotta trudge my way through her section just to get back to Leon. So based on what they're saying here, it sounds like they found a way to take these two characters and blend their stories together in a way where it's going to be fun to play both. And again, like they mentioned in the last video we covered, it's like a sauna. It's like a hot and cold situation where you have the really high octane action with Leon, and then you go back to these slower, more scary, tense situations with Grace. So it kind of seems like a best of both worlds situation, and you know, sometimes I like that. I love the action of RE4, but I also really love those scarier, tense moments of an RE2. And if they can find a way to really blend that and focus on the really positive aspects of those two different stories, I think it could be really fun to play. And hopefully it is an experience of, oh cool, I'm Grace again. This is going to be really fun, and I'm going to take my time and actually enjoy myself. Up next, they ask Kumazawa, we saw Leon wielding a chainsaw in the trailer. Will he be using other weapons? Kumazawa would go on to say, speaking of iconic weapons, a steelbook version will be released. The gun depicted in the foreground is the core of this work and will share its story. Leon loads it, and Grace handles it in another video. We appreciate your attention to this gun. This is cool. This is something that a lot of people, including myself, pointed out in the trailer. Once we actually saw Leon's reveal, we saw him loading that gun in the car. And then I realized, hang on a second, in one of the previous trailers, we see Grace holding that gun. So these two meet each other. I think it's a situation where maybe Leon's like, okay, clearly you're gonna need some help. I'm gonna do just fine with what I can find. Take this gun with you, use it to protect yourself. I think that's pretty cool, and that's something, again, Leon would do. He's a very self-sufficient person. He's not going to need all these weapons. He's going to give it to someone who really needs it. But some eagle-eyed viewers noticed that on the grip of the handle, there seems to be a wing. And, you know, there have been some characters in the past, Claire and Chris in particular, who have some, like, wing symbolism. I would say Claire more than Chris, because on Chris, it's on his alternate outfit, not his main one. But some people have speculated maybe this gun was a gift from Claire to Leon that he will then pass on to Grace to keep her safe. So that's kind of like a cool tribute, should that be true, of like including Claire in some way if they don't bring her back, because Raccoon City is a very big story for her as well. So it seems like that gun has a backstory and might have its own journey leaving Leon and going to Grace, which is pretty cool. And also, speaking of returning characters, some people picked up on the previous third trailer that the voice of the woman speaking to Leon is probably Sherry, which is super nice. We haven't seen Sherry since Resident Evil 6, and it would make sense that she's stuck with Leon and is working with him. I have no clue what happened to Hunnigan, but if that is Sherry, which it probably is, we see a very, quick shot of a blonde woman looking at a computer talking to Leon. That's a pretty cool way to bring back more characters who have significance to Raccoon City. Now, up next, they bring back the word Requiem and also the 30th anniversary for Resident Evil. And with Requiem being a tribute to the dead, or like a Yagoogly, that's got people questioning like, oh, is this going to be a moment in time where Resident Evil progresses past its original heroes and they start introducing new characters and a new story that kind of goes past the Umbrella arc? So Kumazawa says, we'll be planning how the work will develop in the future. Regarding the generational shift, please consider it only halfway done. It's a coincidence that it's being released to commemorate the 30th anniversary. There were many trials and errors, and the development process was complex. He continues by saying it's not a given that the Resident Evil series will end. We want to continue it. As a game that's been in development for 30 years, we're preparing a roadmap that will satisfy fans. Now, based on the use of the term generational shift here, I'm assuming he was talking about moving past our previous heroes and incorporating new characters. So it looks like that's not the case. And that was a concern I had, a lot of people had, of how the developers were saying like this is going to kind of wrap up the Umbrella arc of the Resident Evil universe. And it made it sound like, oh, we're not going to go back to those classic characters. So it doesn't look like that's true. They're only kind of halfway committed to that at the point, which means in the future, we'll probably get RE games with new characters, but they're not going to forget about the classics. Jill, Claire, Chris. These are characters that could all return, whether they're newer games or maybe even prequels. Which is personally what I would really love to see. I really enjoy this format of them introducing a new character, but also bringing back a veteran. In RE7 and Village, we had Ethan, but we also brought back Chris, and he played a pretty big role in those stories. I'm clamoring for more Jill. She's such a great character. She's one of my favorite Resident Evil characters, and she kind of feels like she's underutilized. So having a new story that focuses on her, what she's been up to, I think could be really interesting. And then of course there's Claire. I would love to see a Code Veronica remake. I love Code Veronica. It's a messy game with a lot of issues, but it's super charming and quirky, and there's just something about it that I can't help but really love and appreciate, but it does need a lot of TLC. But I also love the introduction of new characters. I'm fully attached to Grace now. I'm excited to learn more about her journey, see her start off as this very scared character who's going to have a growth where she can actually be competent and actually take care of herself, and learn so much from Leon and vice versa that it keeps the series fresh, in my opinion. So for those who were concerned that we wouldn't get those classic characters again, looks like that's not the case. They're still leaving that door open, which is really nice. And again, that's assuming that that's what he meant by generational shift for the characters, because I even double checked the translation on the other website, and they even phrased it in the same way of generational shift for the characters. So That could mean like the characters moving on and being replaced, or simply just their roles being different now. What do they believe in? Where are they working? How are they operating? So it's a little nebulous, but that's just kind of how I interpreted that phrase. It could be wrong, but you know, that's just how I viewed it. And this game lining up with the 30th anniversary was just kind of a happy accident. Like Kumazawa said, that, you know, is the case for game development. Sometimes you have something that works and then you reach a point where it's like, oh crap, we're gonna have to change some stuff, which delays the development. And it just kind of happened to line up with the 30th anniversary. But Requiem was never meant to be the 30th anniversary tribute to this series. And I also can't help but wonder, looking at the remakes, they have changed some stuff within the story. You look at RE4's ending, there's way more Wesker in it. He has recovered what I assume is the body of Krauser, which I think is teasing an RE5 remake. So it's an interesting point in the remake timeline where if they wanted to, they could probably make some adjustments to the story that allow other characters to survive or come back in some way, i.e. Wesker. Last time we saw him, he was blown up in a volcano, but if they really wanted to, I think they could tweak some of the story stuff and kind of have the OG timeline of Resident Evil games, which still lines up with the newer games, but then they can also have like that remake timeline, which kind of tweaks some stuff, but still fits within the main lore that they've established. So it'll be kind of interesting to see what they do moving forward. Do we get, you know, Code Veronica coming back as a remake? Do we get RE0? Do they do RE5 next? I'm very curious to see how they handle all that stuff. Up next, we talk about the first-person perspective for Leon, and this article is coming to us from 4gamer.net, who sat down with the game's producer, Kumazawa, as well as the game's director, Akifumi Nakanishi. And they say, will you be able to play in a first-person perspective with Leon? Nakanishi responds by saying, of course, Leon, like Grace, can be played in either perspective. We've made various efforts to ensure that he can be played comfortably in first person, so I don't think there will be any discomfort. We'll explain this further at future showcases. This is pretty sick. So again, one thing I mentioned in a really older video is that I really appreciate that they've taken the time and effort to make sure that the third-person perspective is a proper third-person perspective, and that their first-person mode is also a proper first-person mode. Sometimes you have games where it's like, okay, we have both perspectives, but it's very clear that the controls and the gameplay were meant for one and not the other. RE Village at the onset was kind of like that. They eventually added a third-person mode, but it just, to me, didn't really feel quite right playing that game in third person. It wasn't until the DLC Shadows of Rose where it's like, okay, this feels like it's meant to be more of a third-person game. And they've made those changes for Grace. In third person, you'll see much more of her stumbling around, fumbling with the environment, and in first person, you know, they've made those corrections to where that's probably not going to be happening. But I'm very curious to see how Leon plays. He's obviously going to be a very action-oriented character, doing martial arts, tons of crazy gunplay, and when you're doing all that stuff in first person, it can be a little disorienting. So to know that they've found ways to kind of maybe circumvent that is nice, because I expect Leon to be doing some flips and some dipping around the field. So how do you keep the camera in a position that's not going to make you want to Ralph all over the place? But also, how do you make that type of gunplay feel really, really good in first person when you're also mixing in the melee stuff? And also very quickly, they do say that Leon does have a new signature melee weapon, and it's a tomahawk axe, which is what he's going to be using throughout the game. But it looks like we'll have to wait until January to see that showcase. There's no firm date as of right now. They just said look forward to this Resident Evil showcase in early January. So we'll probably have a lot of gameplay footage of Leon, some more of the story stuff and how that's going to unfold, maybe some more surprises in other returning characters, maybe a peek at some of the other enemies that could be in this game. It's probably not just going to be the zombies. So I'm kind of curious to see, you know, what other enemies maybe make a return in some fashion, or if they introduce new ones. So with that being said, that is the video. I am curious, Corduroy. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys thought of what we covered in today's video. A fun question to ask you guys, is there one enemy that you're hoping to see return in Requiem, whether they be Lickers or Hunters or a Tyrant? And what do you think the significance is going to be behind Leon's gun with that little angel wing on it as he gives it to Grace? I will see you guys in the next video. Please remember to always be excellent to one another.